Today's episode of the Geek Seat with Ben Kliewer. I'm joined by my co-host Detective Artimus, where we discuss all things feature film, live action, Batman. Join us after the music. Welcome to episode 3 of the Geek Seat with Ben Kliewer. I am Ben Kliewer, and once again joining me today in the Geek Seat is my co-host, Detective Artimus. Detective, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Ben. I'm here and I'm drinking beer.
Drinking beer, and we're both here, and we're talking about a topic that we're both extremely passionate about today, the Batman, and more specifically, the live-action iterations of the Batman. How excited are you to be talking about this today, Detective?
I am so excited that I have a Bat-rection right now.
I can always count on you to bring the inappropriate commentary to the podcast, and, you know, it wouldn't be the same without you. That's why we're looking for a new co-host. Call 555-9401 if you... Just kidding.
Well then.
But yeah, let's jump into this topic today. Nobody wants to be waiting for us to jump into the topic just talking about Bat-rections. Anyway, so I figured we'd start off... Specifically, we're talking today about live action Batman. So we're going to stick to kind of the major franchises through the years. We're not really going to be talking about like David Mazouz, I think is how you say his name, from the Gotham TV show where he shows up as Batman in like the last 5 seconds of the
Spoilers?
Finale. Yeah, that show's like 8 years old, right?
Just like Smallville, right? Same idea, same like 5 second in costume ending.
Yeah,
spoilers.
It was essentially just a carbon copy of the Smallville ending, but you know, it was basically Batman Smallville is what Gotham was. But I did enjoy the show, but we're not talking about that today.
So let's jump right in with I don't know, I guess, who is Batman to you, Ben?
Well, of course, Batman is Batman. So I'm a young kid of old parents, right? So my parents were a little farther along when I was born, and I have 2 older brothers that are 13 years older than me and 10 years older than me. And so they were like, I want to say 14 and 17 when Batman came out in 1989, and they became obsessed with it. So, of course, as the little brother, I became obsessed with it, right? So that kind of started my obsession with Batman, so to speak, was with the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton, Jack Nicholson 1989 movie. And I didn't really, of course, know a lot of what was going on. Like, my brother showed it to me on VHS, but he'd like fast forward through the parts that had bad words or something, you know, parts that were a little too intense for like a 4 or 5 year old.
Yes.
And then I was a little older, and I was about 7 or 8 when Batman Returns came out. And that one I liked a lot more. And I was a little bit older. I could kind of get it a little bit more. And I liked the imagery. I kind of liked the darkness. It really started my kind of love affair with darker films. You know, some of my favorite movies, and you'll see in the studio here, the posters that I have up on the wall are some of my favorite dark sequels: Batman Returns, Empire Strikes Back, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Technically a prequel, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, and I always just loved Michael Keaton as Batman. Didn't really care about the Val Kilmer or George Clooney movies. And then Batman Begins came out. I really liked those movies. We'll talk about those a little bit later. I think that's going to be in the next episode. And then, of course, we had the Zack Snyder verse, Batfleck, and on. And then, really, it was around 2011, 2012 is when I actually started getting into comic books. And so that's when I started picking up old copies of Batman comic books and old storylines, and then catching up with the new storylines and who was writing Batman now. And this is when, you know, about 10 years ago is when I started really getting into comic books. And that opened up a whole new world for me for Batman. And that really spoke to me on a lot of different levels. Just the story of who Batman is, who Bruce Wayne is, how he responds to villains and people who are trying to create destruction. There's this dichotomy, the struggle between, you know, anger and justice in Batman. You know, what is revenge? What is vengeance? What is justice? And how does he execute that as a man who is trying to be honorable to himself, to his parents, to the family that he's built around him? And that's who Batman is to me. It's the struggle of being human. You know, if you want to be a good person, but there's all this shit that happens in life and it makes you angry, and how do you respond to that? And I think Batman is a really great allegory for that, but he's also just cool. He's the darkness, you know, he's the Dark Knight. He is the Batman. And that's who Batman is to me. What about you, Detective? Who is Batman to you?
Well, first off, thank you for sharing that. That was really cool. For me, Batman is the embodiment of determination, dedication, and vengeance, and what a person can really do to themselves if they're, just focused. He was, peak human. And if we're sharing Batman VHS stories, my mom always told me that when I was a kid, I would go through those VHS tapes like crazy. They would wear out really fast. And at one point, I decided that, hey, Batman might be hungry from fighting the Joker. So I put like a bunch of carrots in the VCR and ruined the VCR. So I got in trouble for that. But, at least Batman was fed. He was taken care of.
Carrots and electronics, as I understand it, do not mix.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way. But yes, Batman he's easily probably the most recognized comic book character aside from Superman and Spider-Man. He's definitely in that top 3 for sure. Absolutely.
And we'll talk about this in a little bit on this episode, that the whole concept of the Batman character nearly died in the late 1950s and early 1960s before it was kind of resurrected with the Adam West show.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Batman represents a superhero who is not super. He does not have powers. He's just rich. And, that allows him to have all these gadgets and all these vehicles and, the ability to do the things, use technology to do the things that are humanly impossible. Like Superman can fly and shoot lasers out of his eyes and all that kind of stuff. And he's bulletproof. Well, Batman can't fly, but he's got a cape that turns into a hang glider. He's got a Batwing, jet. He's got, he's not bulletproof, but his cape is bulletproof. His chest armor is bulletproof. He can't shoot lasers out of his eyes, and he doesn't shoot anyway, but he does have, like James Bond, like laser watches and stuff to cut through safes or whatever.
Yeah. And also one of the things I like about Batman too, is that he is his own problem because when he came out as Batman, he influenced more villains to be more theatrical and stuff. So he's fighting the crime that he's kind of like helped creating. So it's like this endless cycle. You get me?
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty cool. Like, he's just kind of his own problem and he refuses to see it.
And I think he is this, what is so inspiring about him is he is this idealized version of a human being. He's learned everything you can possibly learn and been able to retain that. He's incredibly intelligent. He's taught himself. He's turned his body into the ultimate human, the peak of human physicality. He's athletic. He's big and muscular and strong, but he's also quick. He's fast. He can swing around on ropes and all this kind of stuff. And it's been interesting to see the translation of that from the comic books, where he can, appear to be doing anything in those comic books, swinging from ropes and all this kind of stuff. And how over the years they've translated that onto film and the visual medium of live action. And so that's one reason I'm super excited to get into this topic today, is to not only talk about the actors who played Batman, but the development of how this character is presented in live action over the years. And really quickly, before we jump into that, I want to give a little bit of a shout out or attention, I guess, to the creators of Batman. Traditionally, did you want to jump in on this?
Well, surely you mean the creator Bob Kane, right?
Absolutely not. For those of you who don't know, traditionally over the past close to a century, Bob Kane was credited solely as the creator of Batman. It has since I mean, people have known this for years, but it has since come more to the forefront of the public eye, I guess you could say. That man named Bill Finger, and that is his real name, Bill Finger.
Milton.
Well, Milton, but Finger is his real last name.
Yeah. He had a finger in Batman.
That he had a finger in. Oh my gosh. Anyway, but Bill actually is probably more responsible for creating the Batman as we know him today.
1000%.
If there's a great documentary on Hulu called Batman and Bill, and it is the story of Bill Finger, and essentially he and Bob kind of created Batman together, but Bill came up with most of the concepts that stuck.
I think what Bob Kane really created was just he came up with the name Batman first. He came up to Bill with that idea, and then just kind of that's it. I mean, that's really his real contributions to Batman were, Bill Finger did the cowl and the detective aspect, the backstory, all these characters.
And Bob Kane did come up with his own concept for how Batman should look, but it was it was a red tights outfit with a domino mask
and the stiff wings
and static, like hard bat wings coming off of his back that just stayed there. They didn't drop, they didn't flap, they didn't do anything. They were just big wings. Like when you see somebody dressed up like an angel in a costume, just big static wings sticking off of them, but they were bat wings, and it looked ridiculous. And you're absolutely right, Detective. Bill Finger came up with the concept for, okay, how about a cape, and how about a cowl that has bat ears on it that makes him look more like a bat. It's kind of
darker color scheme, all that stuff.
Scary and mysterious.
And he was pretty much like just a ghostwriter for like the first 30 years of Batman's publication history. It wasn't until like the 60s at, I think it was the first Comic-Con, where it's like, oh, this guy, created Batman, more attention started to go to that. He wasn't just a ghostwriter anymore. He had a name and people were starting to know about him. And at this point, they were renegotiating a contract with Bob Kane and his credit for Batman, because this is right around where the Adam West show is about to come out. And so at this point, Bob Kane had the chance to be like, you know what, Bill Finger, I'm going to give him some credit too. All this, that. He could have righted that wrong for almost 30 years. But no, he doubled down and said, no, I created everything. I am Bob Kane. I am Bat God. Fuck Bill Finger. Who is he? And he just, from then on, he just defended that lie for the rest of his life.
What an ass cake.
What a douche, man. Bill Finger died alone and poor, and he never got to see the Michael Keaton Batman.
No, he didn't. That's true. And it's to learn more about this, we highly recommend watching the documentary Batman and Bill. Again, that's on Hulu. If you've got the streaming service, it's a Hulu original. So even if you've got the commercials plan or whatever you got, the lowest tier, you can still watch it. And it's really incredible. I wept openly at the end of the documentary. I am a grown man, and I openly wept, as I do only when I'm watching Rudy.
What a fucking geek.
I know, I am.
I cried too a little bit, not gonna lie.
Hey, there you go. There you go. So, Detective, I think it's I think my dog is barking in the background is what's going on. Professional studio podcasting.
Do you mean Bat Hound?
Bat Hound is barking in the background. We've got you've ruined our surprise guest for the day.
Sorry. We still got Batmite, guys, so
ooh, Batmite. Do love me some Batmite. Where is he? Oh gosh, we've lost him.
So yes, anyways, major shout out to Bill Finger, Jerry Robinson, Dick Sprang, and all the original contributors to Batman to give him what we know today.
100%. Again, Hulu, Batman and Bill. Check it out. On that note, Detective, let's jump into the meat of today's episode, which is we're going to be talking about all the actors that have played Batman in live action in the major live action franchises. And this episode, we're just going to cover the first half of the list because we've had 37 Batmen in the last 20 years. Before that, it was a few less than that. But we're not just going to go back to Adam West. We're going
beyond Adam West,
all the way back to 1943. Lewis Wilson was the first actor, as far as my research has shown me.
Yes, he is.
Lewis Wilson was the first actor to portray Bruce Wayne and Batman in live action on screen in the 1943 serials. Now, these were these were B movies. These were movies that you would go to the theater because they didn't have any TV. This was the only way that you were going to see, you know,
live entertainment,
like live action filmed entertainment, I guess.
Yeah, I should say.
And they would show the main picture, the picture, you see? And then the B movie was a short serial that would roll after. And that's what these were. These were B movie serials. Sometimes I think they would show them before the feature, but most of the time I think it was after.
Right, and that's how actually trailers came to be, because they would trail along after the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But then people were like, "Hey, no one's sticking around to see my movie when the movie ends." So they put the trailers in front of the main movie now. So that's why we got 40 minutes of trailers now.
Yep. And I did go see a movie, and I always plan on 30 minutes of trailers when I go see a movie, and it's almost exactly 30 minutes of trailers before the movie, sometimes more, as you said. But yeah, so I honestly, I had never watched like the original Batman serials from the 40s. And so you can find them on YouTube. Sometimes
4 hours long, by the way.
Yeah. 4 hours long. Yeah. Both of them. There's two different ones, and they're both almost like, one of them's more than 4 hours, and the other one's like 3 hours and 45 minutes or something.
Like 15, 20-minute chapters or something like that.
Right. So that was the thing, that you'd see one chapter after you went and saw this movie, and then next week you'd go back and see another movie or feature presentation or newsreel or whatever, and then you'd see the second chapter of, the Batman serial. And so it was broken up over a couple months, really. And but I watched this Lewis Wilson 1943 serial.
Oh boy.
And let me tell you what, I was actually kind of surprised at how watchable it was, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't like super boring and dry and something I didn't, I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had to watch it. It was actually somewhat entertaining. Now, it was the 1940s, and there's, let's say, some insensitive language.
On the cusp of World War II, U.S. joining in Pearl Harbor and stuff. So
Yeah.
You can imagine all the slurs.
Definitely some ethnic slurs in this. But apart from that type of material, one thing I was kind of impressed by is the sheer violence of Batman and Robin. Like, they just burst in through a window and just start.
How many windows did they go through?
At least 50. And they would just start throwing haymakers at these gangsters, right? Like, just, these white guys in their zoot suits and their fedoras.
Yeah, never take me alive, eh?
Right, exactly. And they would just go in, and it was like a wailing beatdown of a fight scene. These were not like, it didn't look fake and staged. It wasn't, there was no bam, there was no pow to kind of cover up when they punched somebody.
onomatopoeias.
Right. It was straight up just, the camera was locked in. It was one shot of them just going in and walloping these guys. And I was like, okay, this is pretty impressive and exciting.
There
to
was
watch.
no like stuntmen or choreographers, directors, like, just go in there and fucking beat the shit out of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so that I was kind of entertained by, because I was not expecting it. I was expecting a lot more like tame, I don't know why I was expecting that. You got to look back at the USA and in the 1940s, and it's like, that was fine. Like, show some guys getting the hell beat out of them. Like, that's what we do. And not to say we don't do that now, but it was just straight up boxing and kickboxing, really, on camera for like 5 minutes straight, one shot. And then gas bottles are exploding and poisonous gas is going into the air and all this stuff. What did you think of? Let's stick to Lewis Wilson, because the Lewis Wilson and Robert Lowery, their serials were fairly similar. But let's stick with Lewis for the moment.
Honestly, man, he was pretty good.
Yeah.
Given the time, he had the duality kind of going on, and Bruce Wayne, he was like, kind of being a playboy. They mentioned he was a playboy too, so that was cool. And then when he's Batman, he does some interrogation. Granted, if you can get past, how the suit looked, but it was the 40s, but at that time,
Yeah, it was like a felt.
Honestly, if anyone came to me like that right now with that kind of suit, I'd probably be scared shitless. 'Cause, like, this guy is obviously insane.
Right.
But no, I liked it. I don't know if it was him or the guy in the sequel serial, but
Robert Lowery.
I think one of them had their wedding ring on still in the shots. So
I didn't pick that up.
Yeah, so not a very good bachelor, but aside from that, I liked him. And this is actually the first time we see the Batcave. The Batcave came from here. It was actually called the Bat's Cave.
The Bat's Cave.
But it was right here where we found out that this is like an underground like laboratory and like, like machinery and stuff. So it actually came from here. I mean, before it was just like an underground tunnel, but it wasn't really a Bat Cave, at least in name as well. It came out here first, just like with Harley Quinn. She came out from the cartoon before she was in the comics. Right. So I thought it was pretty cool. Also, the entrance with the grandfather clock came from here too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is it was one of those situations where Lewis Wilson was in the serials in 1943, and then Robert Lowery played it in 1949. But they were kind of the same in a lot of ways, and these were similar actors. Tall, white guy, black hair. Both really great Bruce Waynes. And one of the things that I loved that they just portrayed Bruce Wayne as just like a lazy bag of shit. Like to cover his identity as Batman, everybody's like, oh no, Bruce, this thing is happening down. They're robbing a bank. Let's go see. And Bruce is always like, nah, I'm going to stay here and take a nap instead. And then everybody leaves and then he jumps into the Batcave. And my favorite part, I was watching the 1949 Robert Lowery one. He goes through the grandfather clock into the Batcave. Robin, who was just in costume not 5 minutes earlier, is now not in costume and in a suit in the Batcave. Bruce Wayne shows up. He opens a filing cabinet, pulls their costumes out, and then they run out the door. And then the best part, they don't have a Batmobile. It's just a normal car that they drive around.
Yeah. I think in the second one, it was a limousine.
It might have been
something like that.
At the beginning, I didn't watch the entire 4 hours of the Robert Lowery one, but in the beginning, at least, they just get into like a blue sedan and drive off. In the first one with Lewis Wilson, I think they just had Alfred drive them around in like a Royce.
Okay, yeah.
But that kind of cracked me up. But honestly, really, both these guys, you can kind of categorize them together because they essentially played the same character. Right. The same interpretation of the character, I guess I should say, because they all play the same character. But I thought they were like, they had the suave, slicked hair, business suit, Bruce Wayne thing down, and then completely changed their character to go into Batman, which was always like, where is it, Robin? And I actually ended up having some fun watching these old serials.
Same. It was a lot better than I expected. I haven't seen it like in 15 or so years, and now watching it again, it's like, okay, this does have some entertainment value. And I also like how Dr. Daka was not Japanese.
No, of course not. In the 1940s, you just had a white guy pretending to be Japanese using an offensive accent, and then they'd use a lot of slurs.
Good times.
Times in the 1940s.
Also, it was the first appearance of Alfred as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And there was not Commissioner Gordon in the first serial, but in the second one with Robert Lowery, it was the actual Gordon debut as well as Vicky Vale.
Vicky Vale, Vickety.
Who apparently had a kid brother.
Who knew?
And another funny thing I saw here in the second one is that they use the bat signal and it somehow works perfectly in the daytime.
Yeah. Oh, and I also realized, I think it was in the 1949 Robert Lowery one, he like the bat signal goes up. Robin is in the Batcave, makes a phone call to Wayne's, I think it was an apartment or something. And, because he has a lady over and she's a journalist. And she goes out to photograph the crime scene or whatever that's happening. And then Bruce turns to Alfred and goes, Alfred, is the Batman signal up? And I was like, the Batman signal? Oh, I'm glad they shortened that one. But it's just funny to see like this is the primordial ooze of what we have now of who Batman is, and it's interesting to go back and look at that and see the seeds that were planted in these serials that eventually grew into what we have now.
Exactly. And like you said, they are, I guess, kind of respectively interchangeable in these. I mean, they both played them pretty well for the time. There was also a funny thing I noticed too, how well, I didn't notice if I actually read this, but Robin, he had a black cape.
Ah.
So that's the first time we actually see the black cape. And he wore pink tights to cover his hairy legs.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's funny now when you look back at it.
Well, I didn't know that because I think the 43 version is still black and white. I think the 1949 version is colorized, but I don't know if that was done after or if it was originally colorized. But I didn't really pick that up because a colorized version of film from the 40s it's not that vivid. You know, it's kind of, you know, colorized, but not really.
I think some things should just stay in black and white. You don't need to colorize them. Like I looked at Night Living Dead in color, and I'm like, it was cool, but it just doesn't have that effect.
Doesn't have the same
in the
effect.
black and white.
Yeah, and it's a certain ambiance that you get when something's in black and white. You almost take it more seriously.
Exactly.
With that, let's move on. So the years pass, the 50s go by, right? And at this point, most comic magazines, as they were called in the day, you know, both Marvel and DC, there were tons of small comic book publishers out there, Marvel and DC being two of them. And a lot of them were kind of just going by the wayside. And Superman was holding pretty strong because he, particularly through the Cold War, he had this kind of all-American vibe. And so he was a character that was being used. But Batman was really starting to go downhill. And we almost lost Batman as a character entirely, you know, just completely went out of publication. And then they opted for a TV show in the mid-60s, which is the Adam West 1966 Batman show. And it's really credited with, you know, bringing this renaissance of Batman about, because the comics weren't like the TV show and vice versa, but the TV show brought this whole new attention to Batman.
Made it really mainstream and really solidified him as a cultural icon at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, Adam West is their definitive Batman.
Oh, and I can understand why. You know, he was huge, and this became, even though it didn't last for very long. It was like, I don't know what,
a few seasons,
20, 30 episodes,
and then they had
a movie.
And then the movie.
And the movie's great.
God, I love the movie. That submarine fight on top, and
well,
some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
I was just about to say that. I was going to say one of the most iconic film lines of all time. Sometimes you just can't get rid of a bomb. And
it's true.
And it was designed to be hokey. It was designed to be a comedy.
Silly,
campy. And it was exactly that. And people knew that's what it was supposed to be, you know? And so for a lot of people, Adam West, of course, is Batman. And I actually, you know, of course, Adam West is no longer with us. And here in Los Angeles, where he lived until he died, they had a memorial to Adam West downtown at City Hall.
I remember that.
Did you go to that?
No, I just saw it on Twitter.
Bree and I actually went. And,
okay, cool.
The mayor came out. I think it was Garcetti at the time, if I remember correctly. And, you know, he gave a little, not a eulogy, but he gave kind of a speech about Adam West and like all his contributions to charity and all of this kind of stuff and the things that he did for the city of LA. I'm not quite sure I remember exactly what all these things were, but and then they turned off all the lights in City Hall and they projected the old school bat signal.
Yeah, that's pretty rad.
Onto the front of City Hall. And I've got a picture of me and my wife standing there in front of it. I don't think we were married yet. I can't remember what year that was, but and I teared up, you know, because we lost an icon at that time.
Yeah.
And say what you will about Adam West. I think he has some things of like, I mean, he was a dude and he was like the hot guy in the 60s. And so, you know, I don't think we need to say any more on that. There's always going to be problematic things with guys from that era. But you know, for the most part, I think people hold him in a pretty decent regard. So that was pretty cool. And of course, the series is hilarious. Got some of I think that was the first live action appearance of Mr. Freeze.
Yes.
And of course, Cesar Romero as the Joker.
That mustache, I see it every time.
Refused to shave his mustache, so they just painted over it. And the Meredith Burgess, or Burgess Meredith as
Penguin.
The Penguin.
And then the Batsui, the dance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man, the surfer. I don't know, the Batsui, the surfer. We're on an audio podcast, so I can't really show people, but
I can see it, so that's all that matters.
that's all that matters. And of course Frank Gorshin as the Riddler. We had 3 different Catwomen.
Julie Newmar, Eartha Kitt, and You're mouthing something to me.
Lee Merriweather.
Thank you.
Lee Merriweather. With Eartha Kitt, the first appearance of a woman of color as Catwoman, which took off as a trend after that as well. And we've had several Catwomen of color since then, and that's become ubiquitous with the character. You know, Selena Kyle being a woman of color. Not to mention, of course, Michelle Pfeiffer, who is a fantastic Catwoman. Yeah, so the 1966 Batman, iconic, absolutely iconic, and sticks in all of our memories. Now,
everything about it, really, just the visuals, the onomatopoeias, and the music, man.
The music is classic. That surf rock Batman theme, the Batmobile.
Yeah.
Now, this is when we really had a Batmobile that was as techie as Batman himself. You know, in the 40s serials, which was the last time we saw Batman on screen, he was using ropes and maybe... Did he have batarangs?
I don't remember that. I just remember him using a grappling hook.
Yeah, he used a grappling hook and that sort of thing. And the 66 Batman is really when they started incorporating the James Bond spy tech type of thing.
Right, because James Bond was like pretty hot at the moment.
Absolutely. You know, it
still is, by the way.
Absolutely. I agree. But yeah, I believe it was 62 when Dr. No came out in the theaters. And so James Bond had kicked off just 4 years earlier. And so hit it hard. Of course, the 60s was a big time of like being fascinated with technology and all this kind of stuff.
The atomic age, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The atomic age. And so it was a lot of fun just to see them. And of course, on a TV show, in the 60s, you can do as much as you want as your imagination will allow and budget will allow. And their imaginations probably went as far as their budget could. So, but you had the smoke screen, you had the shark bat spray, you had,
pass me the shark repellent spray.
Yeah. As he's dangling off a helicopter.
Slowly like going down that ladder. Also, too, it had some pretty cool cameos in the show. We had Bruce Lee in there. We had Vincent Price as Eggman or Egghead, one of the two.
Vincent Price. I think he was Egghead.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it was one of those vehicles of the 60s where you had, it was pop culture. It was iconic. And that's why you had these celebrity cameos. It's like Star Wars is now. Like every celebrity in Hollywood is going to their agent, like, get me in a Star Wars. And so now you have all these celebrities popping up and all these Star Wars projects coming out. That was, in a big way, or in a very similar way, Batman in the mid 1960s.
Right. It had a pretty good viewing. A lot of ratings, for its, only like 3 or 4 seasons. It was only there for a short time, but a lot of people were watching it. But I mean, I guess at the end, not a lot of people kept it going, but it had its audience.
And it wasn't necessarily the time when, like, oh, it's not like now where they're like, this show has a big following, let's just run it into the ground,
Or cancel after 1 season.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, that show ran for a while, let's do something else now. Like it wasn't as, sure there were like Nielsen ratings and that sort of thing. But it wasn't necessarily as big of a driver, I think, as it is now, where they're like, this show didn't have 10 billion viewers in the first episode, canceled. Or this show has 10 billion viewers every episode, let's continue it for 19 seasons.
I don't really have anything else to add on that.
Okay.
It was cool. Very colorful. We see Batman fighting at night traditionally with darker colors, but this motherfucker was out in the daytime, scaling the buildings with Robin and those very famous shots. But it was just a product of its time, bright, colorful, and entertaining.
Absolutely. And during this time, then we don't have any really live screen or feature Batman in live action for 30 years after this. We've got Superman in the theaters. We've even got Supergirl at this point, and a handful, we've got Wonder Woman. uh, Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, a handful of different superheroes in live action TV shows and movies. But Batman, and I'm going to use a double entendre right now. Entendre.
Oh, okay.
Batman during these 3 decades went dark.
How dark?
Went pretty dark. But what I'm saying is, in the feature film aspect, Batman disappeared. He went dark. But in the comics, the interpretation of the character starts getting darker and darker. You start digging more into the story of his parents were murdered right in front of his eyes when he was a child. He uses this to drive him to becoming a vigilante. And
yeah, they like right in the 70s and 80s, that's where, people like Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams really brought, the darkness back into Batman. And those are my favorite period of comics. So like, Joker's 5-Way Revenge and stuff like that. It's just, he really brought back the detective aspect, and, Joker was back to killing people again. So we have a lot of credit to thank people like, Danny O'Neill.
Absolutely. And this is when you start getting storylines like Death in the Family.
Yeah.
And just this,
where you had to call the number. I'm like, all right, should Jason Todd live? Yay or nay?
Well, that's the wild thing, and they haven't done this for years, and they just did it with another comic book, and it escapes me which one it is right now, where people can vote online for what happens to a character. But this was in the 80s, and they, Dick Grayson had moved on from being Robin. He became Nightwing and
joined the Titans.
And then they decided to introduce a new Robin, which was Jason Todd, who was a dick. He was just a little shit.
Little hot-headed piece of shit.
He was a real piece of shit. And people did not like him. And so they were basically like, hey, we're thinking about killing off Jason Todd in the next series of comics. Call this 1-800 number and tell us.
I think it was 1-900 probably at the time. You had to pay for that.
Oh, yeah, maybe, actually. You're probably right.
1-900 Pleasure Island.
1-900 Kill the Robin. But you could call in and vote basically as to whether you wanted Jason Todd to live or die. And people, I think, overwhelmingly voted that Jason Todd should die. And we have this comic series called A Death in the Family, and the Joker beats the living shit out of Robin with a crowbar and kills him.
And his mom too.
And his mom.
His mom, that's how he baited him into that warehouse. He used his mom to get him, and then Joker's like, fuck, I'm gonna kill both of you, and they both blew up.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
People forget about the mom.
I have that. It's sitting right there on my bookshelf. I have A Death in the Family.
Oh, I see it.
And I read it probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and that was the last time I read it. So I completely forgot about it.
And then Batman goes crazy, and then Superman tries to intervene because I think Joker becomes like a U.S. ambassador, and he tries to kill everybody in the UN. And Batman's trying to go stop him, and Superman's like, dude, what are you doing? Come on, man, don't do it. So he sucks in all that gas that Joker's about to use, and he just I'm pretty sure that's how it went down. But yeah, Superman's in there too.
Yeah. And it was during this time that you had titles like The Killing Joke and The Dark Knight Returns.
Year one.
These different runs by like Frank Miller and other writers.
Alan Moore.
That told these very dark stories of character origins. And that is what led into a little guy named Tim Burton. And little Timmy B had he was fresh off of
Pee-wee Herman.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is one of my personal favorite movies, of course. We should do a show on that.
Yeah.
And they said, here, Tim, you're weird. Why don't you take a new Batman movie? And I don't think anybody was expecting this.
Yeah. Before they got Tim Burton, I think they actually sought out Richard Donner, who was,
that's right,
off the heels of the Superman movie.
Yeah.
And Richard Donner was like, oh yeah, I'll do it, but blah blah. And then can we get John Williams to compose? So I would love to hear a John Williams, composition of a Batman theme song. That would have been pretty cool. But I think Danny Elfman just nailed it.
Well, and that's part of it. So there's so much to talk about with, and I think we can agree on that Michael Keaton is probably our top or maybe top 2.
He's definitely my number 1.
Okay.
I'm a Keaton kid.
I'm a Keaton kid too, so this is going to be just the second half of this episode is us going off on Michael Keaton.
I would love to go off on Mr. Keaton, sir.
Okay. Anyway, so the way this movie came to be, first of all, Tim Burton comes in, Donner's out, and so I guess Williams is out at that point as well. Burton comes in and he says, I want Danny Elfman to compose the soundtrack, because he composed the soundtrack to Pee-wee's Big Adventure as well. And Danny Elfman, of course, he's a rock guy. He's a rock star. He was Oingo Boingo, the most hardcore band name you've ever heard.
We did a whole piece on Danny Elfman the last episode, but pretty much they weren't sold on Burton's idea until they heard the theme song, which Danny Elfman made for free. And then at that point, they greenlit it.
Well, and that was the thing. Like, Elfman was like, if I'm going to be taken seriously in this industry, this is a theme for a Batman superhero movie. I have to make this good. I absolutely have to make this good. And so he worked his ass off on this theme. And it is, to me, next to anything that John Williams has composed or any other great composer in Hollywood, one of, if not maybe top 3 movie themes of all time, in my opinion.
Right next to, Beetlejuice, which just came out the year before.
Well, that too.
Which also helped Burton get this gig as well.
And of course, Beetlejuice, very iconic theme, very memorable. But I would be pressed to say that you're going to find as many people who could hum you the Beetlejuice theme as could hum you the Batman theme by Danny Elfman.
Agreed. But let's move on from Danny Elfman. Again.
More Danny Elfman. Then there's the idea of casting. Who is going to play Bruce Wayne? Who is going to play Batman? Now, up until now, we've had 3 different men playing essentially the same character as Bruce Wayne. Suave, slick back hair, playboys, just, the definition of the chiseled jaw. And then they come out and they're like, we're going to cast stand-up comedian Michael Keaton.
Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom. And people were pissed.
Yeah, imagine if like Twitter existed back in the 80s, man. It would have been insane.
Oh my God. The project would have gotten shut down. They would have Sonic the Hedgehog this thing.
Bullied the crap out of him.
They would have recast him. Do you think they would have recast Michael Keaton if Twitter had existed in 1988?
No.
I
don't think so. But it'd be a really funny comment section.
It would have been absolutely wild. It would have been nuts because people were really upset. They were like, how are you going to cast Mr. Mom, a guy who's known... Those are my dogs again. How are you going to cast Mr. Mom, a guy who's known as a stand-up comedian? The guy from, what was he in, Bachelor Party? And some other, like, just kind of goofy movies or weird movies in the 80s. They're like, how are you going to cast him as this, like, suave playboy and this muscular superhero? And then they cast Jack Nicholson as the Joker, and that was basically for the clout.
Oh yeah, Jack Nicholson's story, man. So they wanted him right away, but he was like, no. So they considered Willem Dafoe, who would have been a really good choice too.
Oh my God, that would have been amazing.
And then they got to Robin Williams, who was like, yeah, I'll do it, totally no problem. And then as the story goes, they told Jack Nicholson that they're going to get Robin Williams to do it, and Jack's like, nah, fuck it, I'll do the Joker. So they screwed Robin Williams out of being the Joker. And
I'm not gonna let Robin Williams play my role. That was my best Jack Nicholson impression.
It was good. But yeah, so they screwed Robin Williams out the role. So and then I think part of Nicholson's contract was to get a certain percentage of the merchandising sales. So he made
smart move.
Millions off just that alone.
Very smart move. And part of his contract was that he got top billing.
Oh shit! Yeah.
The movie's called Batman, and Jack Nicholson gets top billing in the movie.
It's pretty much his movie. It's his origin and everything. Batman's like a side character, which I actually kind of like.
Batman,
it makes him more mysterious.
He really is a secondary character in the movie that's titled of his character.
Yes,
but it gave us this incredible origin story of the Joker. The prosthetics that they used on Jack Nicholson's face are iconic, absolutely iconic. And nobody's ever tried to do anything like that because you can't recreate that. You can't catch that lightning in a bottle again. Everybody's just had the painted face,
Yeah. Well, I think Jared Leto was chemically bleached, but we're not going to talk about him.
Oh gosh.
But with Jack Nicholson too, I loved, the classic portrayal of him being kind of funny and crazy, and then he uses these weapons that are like props, like the boxing glove, and we see the Joker toxin, which scares the crap out of me because that's one creepy ass way to go.
Oh hell yeah! The TV commercial when he takes over the airwaves and he's got the dead supermodels.
Yeah, love that Joker.
Love that Joker. I actually have
a dead model in there.
I have a dead model in my closet. No, I have a poster, and it's the Jack Nicholson on the beach set with the sunglasses. And brand new Joker products. But that was a really great portrayal. The 80s and 90s had a tendency to do this thing where they're like, let's make everything dark and gritty. And the only thing that really works with is stuff like Batman. And Burton knocked it out of the park with his weird psycho way of looking at the world. And he presented this Batman in Michael Keaton. He allowed Michael Keaton to mold the role, and he played it to my notion. I felt that Michael Keaton really embraced this idea of this guy is in a society. He's in high society. He grew up in high society. He's part of the high society, and he has had this traumatic event happen to him as a child that has made him nuts enough to pretend to be a normal guy and then dress up like a bat at night and beat the shit out of people.
Yeah, and it's cool because you could tell that he hates being Bruce Wayne, and that's his mask. But he just has more fun, and he's more of himself when he's Batman, and you can see that with Michael Keaton's performance.
And the way he portrays Bruce Wayne is, you can tell he's a little off, but he's still charming. And I think that was the essence. He had the curly hair. He's like, what, 5'10"?
Yeah.
And so he wasn't the prototype for who Bruce Wayne was in the comics or who Batman was in the comics. In the comics, Batman's like 6'2".
6'2", like 250.
Yeah, of pure muscle. Yeah. Michael Keaton is not that.
No.
At all. And he doesn't need to be, because in this movie, he brought enough character to the role that made us believe.
Yeah.
He is Bruce Wayne. It made us believe he's Batman. The only gripe that I have, my dogs are playing in the other room. The only gripe that I have about the 1989 Batman movie is the scene when Vicky Vale stays the night and she wakes up in the middle of the night and he's sleeping, hanging upside down from a pull-up bar.
For many years, I'm like, what the hell is he doing? But yeah, that scene sticks out to me.
He's not there's no reason that scene needs to be in the film. It was just like a reference to bats.
Just to show that he's weird.
But that also, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is a testament to how fucked up Bruce Wayne is, that he gets so into this bat persona that he's like, can't sleep in this bed with this beautiful Kim Basinger. Or Basinger. I don't know how you say your last name. He's like, I can't sleep in this comfortable bed. I got to go hang upside down like a bat. They really created this give and take between Batman and the Joker. They invented the storyline of how the Joker, or Jack Napier, was the man who actually killed Batman's parents.
I think that was a Tim Burton call.
Yeah. And that drives the finale, that drives the climax of the film of Batman versus Joker at the top of
that they created each other.
Yeah. That they essentially created each other. And, it's just, in many ways, it's not a perfect film, but to my notion, it's a flawless film and a flawless character story on all of the characters.
It's an excellent comic book movie. It has the grounded, realism, but there's still enough fantasy in there to make it feel like a comic book. Because if you make it too realistic, then it loses that magic that we like about comic book characters. Right. And sometimes it can work, but for me, it's the perfect balance of fantasy and grounded realism.
Now, this kicked off, unless there was something else you want to say?
I would just say also, and Prince.
Bat Dance, baby. And the whole scene where the Joker and his goons go into the museum.
So good.
And they're like painting on works of art and slicing them with knives. And, he gasses the whole place. And then one of the most iconic Batman things to do, he comes crashing through a glass window.
You can't have a Batman movie without him crash through some sort of window.
Absolutely. And of course, this franchise launches Batmania in the early 90s I was going to say in the United States, but really all over the world.
Yeah.
It was a worldwide phenomenon. And this, if the 1966 Batman was the renaissance of Batman, this was like the explosion into mainstream of Batman. And so this launched us into the drive to 1992 with Batman 2, Batman Returns.
I don't know why it's Batman Returns. He didn't go anywhere. I mean, he returns to the screen?
I guess so. But, all the greatest heroes return. Batman, Mary Poppins, Superman, Nanny McPhee.
Yeah.
The Living Dead.
Yes. One of my favorites.
But it's such an ominous title too, in a sense. It's like Batman Returns. It's not just Batman came back, it's Batman Returns.
Yeah.
And this really this was coming on the heels of a project that Tim Burton produced, which was called The Nightmare Before Christmas, in which we learned that Tim Burton has a really weird obsession with macabre Christmas themes.
Yeah, it's a good Christmas movie.
It's a great Christmas movie or a Halloween movie. My wife and I usually like to watch, excuse me, I'm talking specifically about Nightmare Before Christmas. We watch that at midnight on Halloween because it's like the transition between Halloween and Christmas.
But I was thinking Batman Returns is a Christmas movie.
Batman Returns is absolutely a Christmas movie. It's up there with Die Hard.
Yeah.
There was one other one that was an unconventional Christmas movie. I can't think of it.
Black Christmas?
No, it's like a movie that's like, it's not a Christmas movie, but it's a Christmas movie. Like Batman Returns is a Batman movie, but it's Christmas during Batman Returns. So it's a Christmas movie.
And it's weird too, because that movie came out in the summertime. So
it did.
It
came out in June.
Yeah.
But again, Tim Burton, all the good ones are returning for this one, apart from Jack Nicholson because his character dies.
Yeah.
But you have Michael Keaton returning as Batman.
Then with the modified suit, which I think looks better, and the bat signal on his chest is different. It doesn't have those like little extra legs in the bottom.
So I really love the '89 Batman bat suit logo because it is different from everything else. It's got the extra little points on the tail.
It's not even on the cover of the movie.
No, it's the standard bat symbol on the cover of the movie. And the bat signal that it gives him at the end of the '89 movie is the standard bat symbol. So they swapped that out for the more traditional looking bat symbol on the suit. And, but yeah, the armored, it was almost an Art Deco style for his body armor on the Batman Returns suit. And, it was very geometric, and industrial almost.
Yeah.
And, but then we bring in, obviously Kim Basinger isn't in this. Is it Basinger or Basinger?
I'm pretty sure it's Basinger.
Is it Basinger? Okay.
Yeah.
But obviously Kim Basinger isn't in this. Is there a story behind that? Do you know why she wasn't in the second one?
I don't know, actually. She
Okay.
just didn't show up. Oh, I mean, they referenced her in the movie. She just, she didn't want to be part of it, but
yeah. They reference her a couple times in Batman Returns, which I liked and appreciated. I think a lot of times with sequels of that era, they don't do a lot of references back to the first movie.
Right. It's just like a whole new thing.
It's like a whole new story and they don't care. But you have the same, who's the actor that played Alfred?
Michael Gough?
Michael Gough. Gough, isn't that a Klingon delicacy?
Well, I'm thinking of the artist, Mr. Van Gogh.
Oh, yes. But yeah, we had the same Commissioner Gordon, we had the same Alfred, we had all the same cast returning, plus we add just a phenomenal cast of characters. We add Catwoman / Selena Kyle, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, who should have been nominated for an Oscar for that role. Absolutely should. And if that movie came out now, she would be. But in that day and age, they were like,
they're not taking this stuff seriously.
Yeah, superhero movies, they're not eligible for elite industry awards.
These nerds over here.
Right. And she knocked it out of the park. And then, of course, you have Christopher Walken as Max Schreck. Who is just such a good villain in this movie.
Speaking of him being a villain, Max Schreck, that actually is the name of the actor who played Nosferatu.
You're absolutely right. In the 1920,
22?
I almost said 3, but I think you're right.
Yes, so that's where Max Schreck came from.
That's right. And of course, using a Felix the Cat ripoff for his Shrek's department store logo. And then I think one of the best casting choices of all time.
Are you going to say who I think you're going to say?
Pee Wee
Herman as Penguin's dad?
Pee Wee Herman as Penguin's dad. Well, that too. Actually, it was Pee Wee Herman and what's her name?
Marge? No.
No.
I forgot her name.
The girl from the diner in Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
Oh!
She plays the mom.
That's crazy.
She plays Penguin's mom.
I'm sorry. Also, Pee Wee Herman plays Penguin's dad in Gotham too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He has a little cameo.
Got it.
Which was a nice little nod. I liked that.
But who are you going to say, sir?
I was going to say Danny DeVito as the Penguin.
Oh, man. I love where he bites that dude's nose.
I just think it's one of the greatest casting decisions of all time. You've got Danny DeVito, who's like 3 feet tall. Not really, and he is a character actor. But again, this was another actor that a lot of people just associated with comedy. And they're like, oh, we're going to put him in prosthetics. And it wasn't just a guy. It wasn't a dumpy guy in a suit with a monocle like Burgess Meredith was in the 60s. This was a grotesque, deformed human.
Sad, really, too.
It's a very sad and very dramatic story. And Danny DeVito brought this level of gravitas to it while also being hilarious in character. Like, he has so many weird one-liners in this movie. They're hilarious. And he's a pervert.
He's a total creep.
He's an absolute creep.
But an incel.
And so basically, yeah. And so you have sympathy for this character, but you also, like, he's a villain. So
a sympathetic villain.
He's a sympathetic villain, but you're also like, this guy's a creep and I hate him. And the casting, and I think that Batman Returns was underappreciated in its time.
Yeah. There was all that controversy too with the Happy Meal toys where like, oh, hey, we don't want to do this anymore because this movie's way too dark for kids.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I loved it when I was a kid. I've got a weird thing. Like, I'm a human golden retriever. Like, I'm just happy and love everybody.
Are you telling me that you're Air Bud?
I am Air Bud.
Sweet.
And I do love basketball.
I think at one point he did karate too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, they made like 30 sequels to that. But I'm a human golden retriever. I'm happy. I love everybody. I make friends with anybody I meet. But there's something about these dark stories that I just love. And maybe it's the yin and yang of my life. I don't know what it is. But that, even as a kid, I loved this. And it did lead us out of the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton era of Batman. There were the controversy. The parents said, we don't want our kids seeing this movie. And the studios were basically like, we can't sell toys for this movie. It's too dark. Parents don't want to buy them for their kids because they don't want to take their kids to see this movie. And so we got to change course. Now, before we move on from Michael Keaton, there are years and years that pass. Of course, there's basically another 20 years pass. 30. Another 30. There's another 30 years that pass. And we're going to cover that in the next episode. But we're going to end this episode continuing to talk about Michael Keaton because as of this recording, the DC film The Flash has just released. And it features a return. Batman returns again.
Re-returns.
Batman re-returns in The Flash, and we're presented with a multiverse story where
Flash No Way Home.
Flash No Way Home. I mean, it's kind of the Flashpoint storyline. It was definitely inspired by that. But instead of Thomas Wayne, the alternate timeline where Thomas Wayne is Batman, as is what happens in the comic books, they went with bringing back Michael Keaton. And again, Michael Keaton as an actor has been having a renaissance over the last
At least 10 years.
10 years or so, yeah.
Other guys, Birdman.
And Birdman itself was this great commentary on his own experience playing Batman.
Or just playing bird characters. He was also Vulture.
He was also Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming. So, but yeah, so it was I think they saw the writing on the wall of like Michael Keaton's having a resurgence. There's a lot of nostalgia from particularly millennials and a little bit of Generation X that are thinking back to, Batman Returns, which has become much more appreciated now than it was when it was released. The amount of merchandise that you can buy now that is specifically Batman Returns themed is unbelievable. I can buy everything I ever wanted when I was 7 years old.
It's a little easier too when you have a few bucks.
Well, that too, but it didn't exist. They had the Happy Meal toys and then they were like, we can't sell this to kids. Blah.
These kids don't know how easy they have it.
Right. And so we get the Flash movie, and we'll probably do another episode on the movie The Flash, but right now I want to focus on Michael Keaton's appearance and his portrayal of Batman in the movie.
Lay it on me.
So one thing I really appreciated is I think they knew what they were doing in that they're like, we're bringing back Michael Keaton as Batman. We want to build a decent story around him and give him a good character arc for this film, but we also just want to pepper in all these nostalgic references. And I loved it. I loved seeing all these references. Spoiler alert for anybody who has not seen it. We're just going to spoil the shit.
Warning. Go ahead.
So, when Barry and Barry go down into the Batcave, they encounter, first of all, they're using the same house, the same exterior as the first Batman movies, which, the mansion changes in every movie, basically. But they use the same exterior. It's a mansion in England for the Flash when they go to the Michael Keaton Bruce Wayne Manor. And, he's old and he's got gray hair.
Making spaghetti.
Yeah, he's long and stringy and a beard. And he does this whole thing where he explains like the timelines and uses a bowl of spaghetti. And it's great because you see how intelligent he still is.
Right.
And he explains that, now Gotham is one of the safest cities in the world. So they don't need Batman anymore. And then Barry and Barry go down into the Batcave and you've got the original Batmobile.
The best Batmobile, sir. Agreed.
And which has been put back together since Batman Returns.
Oh, okay, sweet.
Because, it split. It turned into the Bat Missile, I believe is what they called it.
I thought it was the Bat Dong.
The Bat Dong. The Bat Dildo. It was not.
I also... I mean...
Hey, wait a minute.
That's a pretty cool feature, though, to have in your car. Like, I got to get to this building. Let me just shave the sides off here.
Well, and again, that's a great scene where he keeps hitting the button and it's not doing it. He's like, okay, now I'm a little scared. And then finally,
there's that close-up of him.
Yeah. And so then you go down, and really there were a lot of references to the 1989 movie in this film. Not really, as far as I could tell, not really any references to Batman Returns, except for they make the second Flash suit out of the Batman Returns armor.
Right, you see his suits right there. And
you see all of his suits, and there are more suits.
I love that blue and gray one. Did you see that?
Dude, the blue and gray one.
So cool.
And it had the 89 insignia with the extra points on it. And there were, I think there were two. So there was the 89 bat suit. There was the gray and blue one that had the 89 insignia. And then there was another one to the left of that also had the 89 extra point insignia. And then on the right, there was the Batman Returns suit. And then like an underwater suit and an armor.
Just like all the action figures that he had, you know. Like I remember the Arctic one where he was in the white suit. I've had like 4 of those.
Dude. And so that was a nice little nod to those of us that grew up with the action figures and all that kind of stuff. And then the part I lost my shit in the theater when Barry pulls up the little felt bag and he goes, hey, this bag laughs. And he plays the thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the end of the first Batman movie.
Yeah, I popped for that, man.
And I was like, that kind of, those little nods. I mean, it was very much in your face. Like, it wasn't a subtle hint. It was literally like, here's a thing from the movie.
Yeah.
But I still loved it.
It was great.
And he's got a new Batwing because obviously he crashed the first one into the cathedral.
Well, actually, he was shot down by Joker's very large gun.
Very, very long. That's a super magnum.
Totally not overcompensating.
That's not a python. That's an anaconda.
Woof.
But yeah, he was shot down. You're correct. And did you notice that the 1989 Batsuit in the Batcave still had damage on it?
Oh, no, I didn't see that. That's a pretty sweet detail.
So there's like scuffs and all kinds of stuff on it. So it's like
he never cleaned it up then? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, well, he switched suits immediately after that. Okay. You know, when he returned. He was like, I'm returning. I'm gonna
retire this one. It's got some stench on it.
But you never know. Maybe he felt responsible for the Joker's death. And so he didn't wear that suit anymore.
Well, I mean, this Batman, he was clearly a killer, which is, you know, in a way comically accurate because in Batman's first 2 years of comic book publication, he was an anti-hero. He had his own gun and everything. He just started blowing people away and like hanging them off the Batcopter. So, I mean, it's not the Batman we know, but in a way it's still, you know, comically accurate, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's supercuts on YouTube that you can watch of like, here's every person that Batman kills in one of the movies. And it's like the Red Triangle gang. He just sticks a bomb on a guy and pushes him into a sewer.
He smiles too.
Yeah. So it's, you know, there's a whole thing of like Batman. Yeah, he kills. And that was an issue. I'll talk about that later in the next episode. But that was an issue I had later on in some of the movies. But I really thought, how did you feel about Keaton's Batman story arc in The Flash?
It was cool. It was another sort of like Dark Knight Returns. That's where he comes back for one last hurrah. Mm-hmm. I liked that we got to see him fight in a way that we couldn't see before because you know he couldn't even move his neck in those movies, but now he's like jumping off of people and shit, and like how we see him fight in like the Arkham game. So it was really cool to finally see Michael Keaton perform as the Batman we all sort of envision him to be and what they try to do back in, you know, Batman and Batman Returns. So I loved it.
It's a similar concept to me of when we all grew up watching the movie Tron, and then they came out with the movie Tron Legacy. Yeah. And the visuals in that were what we were all imagining in our brains when we were watching the first one.
Right, but at the time it was, you know, just so limited.
Right. And so this Batman who is shooting grappling hooks and swinging around and kicking guys and doing flips and gliding down on his cape and beating the shit out of guys and jumping all over the place. That's what I imagined in my mind when I saw Batman and Batman Returns. But of course, as you mentioned, the suit was very restricting. He couldn't move his neck, which is a joke that they then made in, I believe it was The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
The
Nolan
trilogy.
He's like, you want to be able to turn your neck?
You want to move your head. Okay.
You make moving the driveway easier.
Yeah. And, but I was a little disappointed he didn't drive anywhere in the Batmobile in The Flash.
Yeah. I wanted to see that thing ride one more time.
But the Batwing jet was
super cool.
So cool.
I like how he's doing like the barrel roll, but he's still like stabilized.
The geocentric cockpit that stays vertical while the plane does a barrel roll.
That was pretty cool.
So cool. And you know, then they can drop out of the bottom and the jet stays in hover mode and he's like, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, every time he died, I cried.
Yeah. And that's part of the thing of the movie, obviously, again, spoiler alert, but they try to fix the timeline multiple times, and so we see Batman die a handful of times. And how did you feel about the end? You know, we see Batman die a couple times, and we have a final death of Keaton's Batman. But it can also be kind of left up to interpretation with this whole multiverse thing. Like there could be another timeline where that Batman's still alive. Like they did not necessarily... They closed the book on it, but they can reopen it at any time, I feel like. But I don't think they're going to make another Flash movie because it's not doing well.
No.
And people don't like Ezra Miller. And, well, some people do, I suppose. But on the broad spectrum, Ezra's in a lot of trouble. But so it doesn't look like they're going to make any extensions of this film. So how did you feel about the way... Do you feel like this was a fitting end to Michael Keaton's Batman, a fitting end to his whole story arc from 1989 to now?
I think so, because, you know, Flash inspired some more hope into him. And then he just kind of went out like a badass. He took down a Kryptonian. So that's something I never thought I'd see Michael Keaton do as Batman.
Yeah. And it was a great line because, Batman is dying there. He gets his dramatic death scene, where Barry's holding him in his arms and he's
Yeah.
clearly gonna, the classic.
Ugh.
And Barry says, we can do this again. We can bring you back. And he says, you already did.
Oh, tears.
Oh God. Oh God.
Okay, dude. So real quick, since we're on The Flash, give me a quick review of the movie itself, like 30 seconds.
Within the context of where it's come out in the timeline of this DCEU universe, multiverse, whatever we're doing, and now that we're on the cusp of a new DC cinematic universe, is The Flash a good movie? Is it worth seeing if you're a Batman fan if you're a fan of Michael Keaton's Batman? Absolutely, 100%. Go see it right now. If you love Michael Keaton as Batman, go see The Flash. Is it a good finale to Michael Keaton's career as Batman? Absolutely. I thought so. Is it a good bookend to The Man of Steel? Really most of this movie is except Michael Keaton as Batman and Sasha Calle as Supergirl, who was incredible.
Only for like 8 minutes of the movie, but she was pretty great.
She was awesome. But yeah, for my money, it was a Michael Keaton Batman movie, and I loved it because of that. How about you, Detective?
Well, real quick, it was a movie where we got Ben Affleck Batman and Michael Keaton Batman in the same movie.
We did.
So that was pretty cool. I wish they would have interacted, but
That would have been fun.
I think it was a fun movie. I really liked it. I wanted to love it. Michael Keaton was great. Sasha was great. Seeing Zod, it was pretty cool again. And that fucking George Clooney ending, dude.
Oh my gosh, the George Clooney cameo at the end. How did that? Listen, I get it that the timelines are crossing or whatever, but it didn't make any sense. It was just for the sake of a cameo.
Yeah, it's like, where would they go from there? Is that how it's really going to end for the DCEU? Oh, actually, no, they have Aquaman too, but I don't know. I mean, it was pretty fun. I laughed, and I would give this, for those Movies in a Nutshell fans, a damn fine movie.
It was a lot of fun to see in the theater. I will watch it again purely for Michael Keaton. If it didn't have Michael Keaton as Batman, I wouldn't watch it again, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there was some emotional depth to it, and I liked the the mother son.
There was,
the tragic depth in it. So that was really cool. But yeah, I really liked it, but I wanted to love it.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad story. It's just like the rest of the DCEU. It was like good concept and some poor execution. But out of all of them, this is one of the better DCEU films, or Snyderverse, or whatever you want to call it, or extensions of the Snyderverse. This was one of the better ones.
Agreedo.
McClunky. All right. Well, ladies, gentlemen, NBs of all kinds, thank you so much for listening to the Geek Seat with Ben Kliewer today. As always, my name is Ben Kliewer. I've been joined today by my co-host and bestest friend in the whole world. That might be a little premature. Detective Artimus. Detective, anything to say to the people before we sign off?
Well, once again, you can find us on all available podcasting platforms. If you're watching us or listening to us on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe. And the next episode, we will cover the other Batman from, Kilmer to Pattinson. So that should be a lot of fun. So please make sure your notifications are on and stay tuned for that next episode.
Absolutely. Be sure to like, thumbs up, all those great things. Subscribe on all the platforms. And again, just like the detective said, we're going to be back with another episode covering the second half of our journey through live action Batman. Again, for Detective Artimus, my name is Ben Kliewer. This has been The Geek Seat with Ben Kliewer. And remember, folks, I'm always drinking out of this red cup because whenever Ben Kliewer shows up, it's always a party. Have a good one.
Bill Finger created Batman.